Welcome to Tales from the Golden Imp. I am Joe Craig, the Impish Skald. Last time, the group caught sight of the goblin horde and followed it all the way to their nest. They found this nest on the Chundans side of Godric's Pass. We also witnessed a prayer from none other than the Skald, and what seemed to be answered by Callisto. Deeper into the caves they go, left with a choice of left or right. Which way will they choose? Let's find out in this episode of the Calmbringer Cycle. Welcome to Tales from the Golden Imp. Episode 5, Secrets Below. The darkness breathed deeply around the two roads that lay out before them. The blue glow from Regos' stone was dim, but in the darkness they found themselves in, it was like a beacon in the night. With the noise coming from the left path, the group chose to head into the depths of oblivion. Morris led the way into the darkness. Regos and his stone followed at a distance with Meg and Dandros. They left Jaina in the alcove, with a little bit of a trap set for anyone that would get a jump on her. Jaina would stay behind until it looked like there would be no other option than to fight. Then they would retrieve her, or if the distance began to grow too large. Regos had used one of his final spells to set a silent alarm for her to trigger if there was trouble or if she had to abandon the post. He was down to just his raw, arcane bolts of energy now, so his skill with a blade would have to be paramount here. One thing that was troubling Maris was the lack of blood. Dwarven blood was to be expected, but he had not seen any of it in a while. That posed to be an ill omen to him. There was only two reasons for that. Either Durin had healed in some way, or he was running out of blood to spill. From the side of the wagon, he feared it was the latter. The big man paused in his silent footfalls as he saw a change in temperature ahead. Just around the curve of the tunnel, there was something warm there. Not hot, but warm. Maris raised his hand to signal to the others to wait. Forward he crept to get a better look at what was around the corner. The stone of the cave was natural for the most part. There were some areas that were showing signs of being worked at least to some capacity. The big man crept forward towards the source of that heat. A smell also flew into his nostrils. The smell of blood. As Maris approached the source of heat, a small blob of heat on the ground, almost discarded in a way, the smell of blood increased. The source of heat was a bundle of rags, bloody ones at that. They smelled of dwarven blood. The bleeding had been stopped, it would seem. At least caught up to this point. Motioning the group forward, he looked for traces of heat from blood droplets. Not seeing any, he knew he needed better light. Using the blue light from Regos, Morris was able to pick up a slight trail, though trampled underfoot. The blood wasn't much, but there was something. The fact that there was still blood meant that Durin's heart was still beating. They had to find him. While Maris had focused on the ground, Dandros touched him on the shoulder. Maris looked up just in time to see a heat signature move in the dark up ahead. Pushing against the wall to flatten themselves against it, Maris and Regos pulled their bows and nocked arrows. There were two goblins up ahead, from the size of the heat signatures. The two did not come down the main thoroughfare, however. They turned off another path. The group crept forward to that junction. There was light down that corridor. The two goblins were standing in front of a wooden door with iron bars in it. Two torches were alight next to the door, giving the area plenty of light to see. The goblins were just reaching the door when the one on the right took a torch from the wall and shined it into what could only be a holding cell.
Rest, you lot. Much work to be done.
The goblin's voice echoed in the darkness. As a small brown goblin turned, keys clanked on his hip. The two goblins continued deeper into the cave. They had found some of the prisoners. As they went on, so too did the group creeping to the door to see if the lock was a simple enough one to pick or if they would need to get those keys from the goblins. Once this action was taken, the clock would begin to tick. It would take a matter of time before their presence was discovered. Yet they had to know if the locks here could be picked. Well, hello folks. We're going to get you out of there. Just hold on tight while we work out the logistics for all this mess. Regos whispered into the cell. Is everyone there? Are we missing anyone? And you lot from Malatin? Malatin? No, we ain't from Malatin. We're from Chunda, retorted a woman deep from within the cell. You're still going to help us, aren't you? Sounded off another man in the cell as he approached the door. Of course we are. We aren't going to leave you all here to the goblins. Regos sounded confident in a way. Not knowing if the folks from Malatin would actually help this lot, Regos himself would have to make sure that they were released. The way some people talked about folk from Chunda down in Malatin, Regos was truly concerned about if Malatin folk would actually help these people once they found out they were from Chunda. Small town rivalries drove Regos nuts. The fact of the matter was that the two towns needed each other more than they knew. What happened to one happened to the other. Key example set right here in front of them. Goblins hit Chunda first and then Malatin. The two cities were tied at the hip. And there was no way around that. Back to the lock though. Analyzing the lock, it was simple enough with two tumblers, nothing major to pick. The trouble was, if they let this lot out, they would be noticed in their absence. Telling these people that they would have to stay put a bit longer was going to be a trick. But he would have to do his best to convince them they were not being abandoned. Alright you all, listen up. We're going to need some help here. We got to find some other prisoners, and in the meantime, we need you all to keep the guards right annoyed. That way, they are focused here, so we can lurk about in the dark unobstructed. That clear to you all? What about us? You aren't going to leave us here, are you? Of course not. You have my word. When it's time, we will deal with your guards and get you all out of here. To speed up the process, do you all know where the other holding cells are? And what's on down that way? Regos asked as he pointed in the direction of the guards. The mines and the blacksmith shop is down that way. They brought this right bloody man, practically drug him in that direction. I think they were taking him to the smithy. They already drove poor Dulin to exhaustion. This Dulin, was he your smith? Well, he was. Alas, I don't think he's with us anymore. I think they killed him right after they drove him to the bone, said one of the others. Regos quickly unlocked the door for them. As he did, he looked up to the group. Alright, listen you all. I'm not here by my lonesome, but we aren't here in numbers either. Give us a good 60 count before you get in the guard's attention. I've unlocked this, so if you get a chance to get a little vengeance on your captors, if, and big if, we have a lass at the entrance named Jaina. If you eliminate the guards and you find your way out, do so slowly and quietly. Only do it if you get that chance. Don't risk it if it's not a windfall. Everyone clear? We will be back. Deeper in the heart of the mountain, a long shadow hovered over an anvil. Weak, depleted, and tired, a dwarf raised a hammer for another pitiful strike, his lone eye with the faintest glow of purple from the Skald's abilities. The hammer fell. As sparks flew, the metal sang. Over and over the hammer rose, paused, and was driven down with all the force that Durin could muster. The left side of his face looked as if it were wax that had been put to heat. The acid of a dragon's breath had melted his face years ago. Sweat always made it look as if it was fresh. Battle with that dragon had cost him a lot more than half his face. It had cost him some of the greatest friends he had ever known. It had cost him his lover. His axe slew that monster, but it was just the parting blow. Chance had made the way for him. Even the pang of loss was dull right now. He didn't have time to mourn Chance. Durin was bruised, bloodied, but the blades had to be made. The army needed them, and there was a war that had to be won. He had to forge them. He had to finish them. The smelted iron was poured to make the rough shape, but that shape was not sharp. It was bad for cutting, and that would be no good. How could an army strike true without a good sharp edge? How could he put his stamp on a single blade without a good edge? The steel sang, and soon the grindstone would howl. There would be another decent blade for the horde. There would be another goblin that could strike true. A smile began to creep across the melted face of Durin of Malatin. He had to make the Skald pleased. It was all that mattered. Such a simple creature with a simple goal, one weapon at a time. Hammer on iron to make the sparks fly. The Skald would be pleased with this one. Temper the iron, make the steel sing. Only then would it whistle through the air. Durin plunged the crude blade into the oil to quench his thirst. To the grindstone to sharpen that fine edge, to prepare for a second thirst. The thirst that the blade would seek until it was no more. The thirst that the steel held, in a way to make the most savage of warriors pale in comparison. No one understood the craft. When you forge something, you speak into its soul and make it what it longs to be. Only then do you have a true blade. Sweat and blood dripped from the scarred body of Durin as he moved, blade in hand to the grindstone. Beside the grindstone was a pile of blades ready for the killing fields. The Skald would be pleased by at least one of them, but one more just to be sure. He had to please the Skald. She was that important. Demanding, yes, but vital. She had to be pleased. His weariness had to be ignored. It mattered not. The only thing that mattered was pleasing the Skald. A pair of goblins checked in on the blacksmith. They were in awe of how she drove them, looking to the corner where the corpse of another dwarf lay. That one had proved to be too weak to please her. Would this one? Or would he die before he could? As silent as they arrived, the two goblins left. We'll save the clank of keys on the hip of the brown-skinned goblin. That clank drew the ire of Durin. How dare he interrupt his work? The Skald would not be pleased. The small goblin jumped by just the way the one-eyed dwarf looked at him. That faint purple glow swirling around the gray eye of hatred. So much hate, all bottled up in one eye. Put his hand to the keys on his hip. Silently, they retreated into the darkness. Durin watched as they disappeared before he turned back to the spinning grindstone to make it sing once more. Back at the crossroads, Regos met back up with the others. Not the lot we were looking for, but the lads and ladies from Chunda. They described a dwarf with a melted face being taken deeper in that direction, but not the rest of the prisoners. They said it was the entrance to the mines, where they had a blacksmith set up down there. Pren's coin on that being where this Durin lad is. But what of the rest of the Malatin folk? Morris asked impatiently. Well, from what those folks had to say, there are more cells down that way toward another digging site. If they aren't in the mines. Regardless, we can't set this folk free until we're on our way out. I told them that we had to be all sneaky, and they asked them to buy some time if the guards were making their rounds again. Regos reached for his pipe. It had been far too long since he had a good smoke. He thought to himself that soon it would have to be time for that smoke, otherwise he'd be a dead man. So what's the plan? Find Malatin folks, circle back for these guys, then go for Durin? We have a ticking clock on us already. It's only a matter of time before Jaina has company. We need to hurry. Hurry, yes, but not such waste. Not such haste. That would just lead us right into the arms of Necropus. We have to be clever. Luckily, you have a charming and clever lad with you. I've given them away to buy us some time. But enough chatter. We need to move before we are spotted. Just listen for commotion, and that will let us know that the guards are on the way there. With that said, Regos began down the other road into darkness. Perhaps they would find the others that way. Leaving the T intersection, Dandros made a mental note of the positioning of the tunnels. The long part of the T was curving off to the left in the direction of the cells that they were leaving. Dandros didn't like the idea of leaving folk from Chunda behind to be dealt with by the goblins. This lot of goblins were right down evil in his eyes. Dandros had met and worked with many a goblin that weren't like this. Something like an infection in the craw of this tribe had to be there for a reason. Perhaps this was the tribe that Chunda was always at odds with. There was something vile at the heart of this lot. This was an unusual set, to say the least. Yes, goblins would raid and steal, but they did it for survival. They had been driven to areas where living was downright harsh. They still had a reputation for being foot soldiers for not only Callisto, but Caleb. Goblins knew their craft, and it wasn't just in killing. But this group, war was their craft, or he would shave his beard. Evil was in this place. Dandros couldn't put his finger on what that evil was, but there was a haunting feeling to the whole place, an echo that seemed to reverberate off the walls, like whispers that were just too low to hear. He didn't know what it was. He just hoped they would escape it before they ended up in those jaws. Meg felt it too. This darkness was hiding it. Somewhere she felt a malice that could not be reasoned with. On in the darkness they crept. She wished so badly Regos' stone wasn't needed. It was making her nervous. Nervous enough to pull her kukri just in case that darkness were palpable. She kept looking for something purple, not knowing why. They were moving so slow in the darkness. If only they had a torch or something brighter. The darkness was so tight down here. Meg was not the claustrophobic type, but this place was making her understand the sensation all too well. As they continued along the curving tunnel, the natural cave gave way to hewn stone. The goblins here cut their home into the stone. They widened these tunnels. Why? Wagon ruts showed just how much effort went into digging out the caves. Lots of labor went into this. To what end? Each foot seemed to take an eternity to cross. It was getting to Meg. Caution was one thing, but this was getting ridiculous. Time was against them. They had been lucky up to this point. But she felt it in the depths of her soul that luck was drying up. Finally, something was heard in the darkness. Groaning from deeper in the dark. That sound that someone long past exhaustion, too tired to sleep, weeping as well. Here and now, they found the prisoners from Malatin. Slowly, they approached the sound of the dark. Again, torches were lit next to the door that were placed in sconce on the wall. Wagons were all along the walls of the cave, some of them loaded with dirt and stone, others empty and dirty. Inside the cells was some very exhausted people. Husbands were there with their wives trying to console them. even a few children here and there, many of them covered in dirt and grime.
Maribeth, is that you? Good. Is everyone here, or did they split you up?
Dandros whispered into the cell. The sobbing of one woman stopped immediately at his voice.
Oh, Dandros, my Belden's beard, thank the gods. No, they split us up some. Some of us are already working deeper in the cave, on that way behind you. They'll be guarded, however. Many of the goblins that pulled us down here went with them.
Her chubby fingers gripped the bars as she continued.
You got to get us out of here. And you got to get Charlie. He's been taken to dig. And poor Durin. He's so very badly hurt. He's not with us either.
Regos moved to pick the lock.
Don't you worry, lass. We'll have you out of here in a snap. Reinforcements are on the way, but we will have to get out here quickly and quietly as possible.
With a few quick motions, the lock snapped open.
We need to get the Chunda folks too. But I think this is as much as we can push without tempting Prin to jerk the rug out from underneath us. We've pushed our luck far enough. I think you're right, Regos. I'll slip back to the Chunda folk while you get this lot out. Get Jaina while you're at it. I had a feeling we're gonna need her.
With that, the Dragonkin disappeared into the dark. With the lock undone, the door swung open and the rest of the group began guiding the prisoners towards freedom. Stealth was not an option at this point, but they were trying. Maris turned away from the group, pulling another arrow as he went to make sure he was ready for any trouble. Maris, at a quick stalk, approached the unlocked door.
All right, folks, it's time to go.
Maris swung the door open and positioned himself beyond the door with his arrow trained on the darkness. Quickly, the people from Chunda were falling out of the cave and down towards the entrance. They were not being quiet. How could you move a crowd quietly? It just wasn't done. And of course, it was this point when Maris saw heat from the tunnel. One figure roughly goblin in shape, and another about man-sized. He fired and shot at the goblin, shape figuring it was for the best. A squee in the dark had let him know that his arrow struck true. The human-shaped figure dove to the ground on all fours and began to move for an assault. Maris could only think for a moment that this was not a friend. He then pulled another arrow and knocked it. He let the arrow fly, but it missed the mark. This person was quick. On him before he knew it, the figure leapt into the light and bit at Maris's neck as she wrapped her arms and legs around the big man. Skald tore into his throat with a spray of blood. Her mark was true. Not going quietly into the night, Maris pulled a dagger from his side and stabbed the wild woman. The dagger found purchase and gave Maris some breathing room as his figure retreated into the darkness. Maris could feel himself getting lightheaded already. He was losing too much blood and too quickly. Not yet, he told himself, and followed the retreating figure into the pitch of dark. Must find Durin. He was trying to keep himself calm. He readied his bow for another strike. Deeper into the darkness, she pulled at him. Farther away from his allies. Farther away from his friends. Closer to death. There, he saw a flicker of movement. And in the dark loosed his arrow. Steel sparked on stone. He had missed. Now there, little hunter. Where is your patience? Why do you seek your death so surely? As a cackle sounded in the dark, something moved quickly. A momentary flash of heat and then coldness flying in his direction. He intended on moving, but his body was not swift enough. He leaned where he wished to sidestep. His dagger plunged into his own shoulder. Luckily, not the lung. But that would make it harder to draw his bow. So easily you bleed, just like the beast you slay. Respect for the hunter is respect for the prey.
He was moving into a larger cavern now. He saw traces of heat from blood here and there. Spinning to check above him was done too late. Somewhere in the distance he could hear a hammer on anvil. He could hear Durin. But the last thing Mars saw before the heat left him was a woman's form, leaping from a cavern wall. The gore was cooling on her. Her teeth tore out his throat, and Maris passed into Necropus' embrace. Back at the T intersection, Regos greeted the Chundans and pointed them in the right direction. As the last couple were coming, they stopped and told Regos that the big guy had been attacked by the crazy woman that ran the goblin nest here. All right, you all go get out of here. Tell the others that I'm going down to search for Durin and try to help Maris. Can you do that for me? Of course, they responded positively. Off the two of them ran. Regos pulled his scimitar and cast a light spell upon it, knowing that anyone that had got the jump on Maris would be too wise for him to sneak past. He was wishing for Jaina at his side right about now. Into the darkness he plunged. The sight that greeted him at the cell where they found the Chundan survivors was one of horror. The viscera that was sprayed around the site was a lot. Maris was in trouble. A lot more trouble than that lot thought. Regos charged forward, hearing the plate and chain of Jaina echoing in the darkness as comforting sound. It seemed just like moments before the cave turned and opened up. Laying there, sprawled in his own blood, was the black dragonkin. His throat was ripped out, and he was covered in that darkest of bloods that only an artery can provide. A message was scrawled quickly in his blood. Interlopers, I await thee at the temple. By this time, Jaina called up Regos. So had Dandros. Meg was busy pulling the survivors to safety. And there in the darkness, a ping of hammer on steel could be heard. The gore seemed to continue on into the tunnels as well. Following the bloody footprints in the dark, they continued until they became more and more faint. She wasn't wounded, it seemed. The blood was from Maris, and that blood had finally worn off. The glow of a fire up ahead led them straight to Durin, who was still working tirelessly. He too stood in a puddle of gore as some of his wounds had opened up. The broad man was wavering, swaying back and forth with each hammer strike. The purple glow from his one eye began to fade, just as the hammer fell, and with it, Durin collapsed. Dandros and Jaina caught him before he could hit the floor. Dandros laid hands upon Durin and attempted to heal the dwarf. The wounds closed up, but the solitary eye did not open. He sleeps. Exhaustion cannot be cured in such a fashion. He'll live, but we gotta get him out of here. With that, Dandros hefted the big man on his shoulder for a fireman's carry. Retreating back the way they came, they were on high alert for Mars's killer. They had gotten Durin, and they had gotten the others, but the goblins would be alerted now. They had to be swift. Dandros pushed on, feeling the fatigue that was gripping even him. He could not stop now. He sought the sun. Well, he sought the moon. He wished for the sun. As they reached the mouth of the cave where the guard station was located, they could hear a goblin horde from within. They were running full tilt. They were missing people still, but this would have to be better than nothing. Durin was dropped onto the hard ground outside the cave. Meg rejoined the others. What now? The horde comes out, we're doomed. Should we get them across the bridge and drop that bridge? Well, that sounds like a perfect plan. Get that lot to get Durin and Dandros. I don't think he's got another ounce of energy to spare. Regos said quickly. The Malatinians and Chundans helped the weak and the broken across the bridge. All the while, Regos looked into the cave. Something kept him from issuing the command to cut the bridge. They were outsiders here.
That bridge was all that kept Chunda and Malatin together. If winter was to be harsh, that bridge would be needed. Jaina looked at Regos. "We're not done down there, are we?" With a shake of his head. "No. She's waiting for us. I don't know who she is, but she's waiting for us. I don't think it's to kill us, but it's almost as if I'm being compelled to go listen to what she has to say." Meg approached the other two. "Well, I'm not going to let you go down there by yourselves. I'm feeling the same way. We aren't done down there." Dandros was catching a second or third wind at this point. He was trying to cross the bridge again, though he was greeted with protest by a large Chunda woman. Jaina called over to him. "Keep them safe, Dandros. We'll be back." That seemed to settle things for the big woman. She guided Dandros to the far side of the bridge, whether he liked it or not. The three of them, Meg, Jaina, and Regos, entered back into the cave. It seemed to be glowing purple in the dark now, as streaks of that purple color of amethyst seemed to float in the night. Before they could get too far in, their attention was turned to a great flapping sound from outside the cave. "What now?" Regos exclaimed. Lanterns were aglow outside the cave as two baskets of elves from the Great Falls Forest began to unload. Two large rocks were flapping just over the baskets, looking for a place to light. Leading the way was a tall, dark-skinned elven man who gave the three a bow and a salute. "Greetings from the Great Falls Forest. We have come to aid the rescue. What needs done?" Without hesitation, Jaina stepped in. "A lot of you with us. We have more people to rescue from within. If you can spare some men and women to help keep those that we have pulled from the nest safe, that would be most excellent. Jaina Krist at your service. Service of the Hall of Howlis," finishing with a bow of her own. "Captain Gillard Tones at yours. You heard her. Regiment 1, 2, 3 with us. 4, you keep the rest of them alive." With that, members of the Feldus military went into the cave with Jaina, Meg, and Regos. Each of the regiments contained about 50 soldiers, and as they went, 50 soldiers splintered off towards the living quarters of the cave, 50 splintered off to the next T-intersection towards the mines. The final 50 went deeper into where they had found the residence of Malatin. There in the darkness, things opened up as hundreds of purple eyes waited in the dark. Amethyst glowed in dark, coalescing around the figure standing before the earthen temple, buried in the darkness. A step pyramid that had been dug out by the forces of goblins, men, and dwarves. As the group of soldiers entered the huge cavern, the purple eyes all looked towards the being in front of the pyramid. "Go, my children," Skald spoke into the darkness as the glowing eyes began to descend into a tunnel at the heart of the chamber. She was lit by the glow of the amethyst crystals here and there in the walls. Clusters of them around her feet allowed all to see the tattered furs that she wore. The emaciated body was taut like ropes of sinew. The nails at the end of her hands were beginning to grow into great claws. The goblins all rushed down the ladders that were found there at the heart of the chamber. The Skald spoke once more. "Interlopers, know this. Callisto comes again. This time Edius will be the first to fall. This time the heart of resistance shall be the first to perish. Chase us and die. Flee and leave. The Skald has spoken. The beast you command will soon be mine." With that, Regos had heard enough. He let loose the last spell he had at his disposal. A streak of flame toward the balding woman in furs. Before the bolt of fire could make its purchase, a small goblin leapt in front of the Skald. It fell dead, charred. With that, the Skald began to follow her goblin horde into the darkness below. There were too few to pursue. The Skald was right about that. Even if all 150 soldiers were here in this room, there were thousands of goblins. And who knew what else the Skald would have at her disposal? The deeper parts of the mountain had a network of caves,
from things that nested there. The Skald had returned, with threats of Callisto on her tongue. Back on the surface. By the time Lord Eldos and his company arrived to Godric's Pass, the sun was beginning to rise the next day. He was greeted by two massive rocks patrolling the skies. As the temporary bridge was in sight, he was happy to see so many men, women, and children were there. Malatin would live on, but the numbers were far too many from what was missing. The wounded was being placed on wagons to be hauled back to the towns. Durin there amongst them, his axe found laying upon an altar. The elves from Feldus wanted to check it thoroughly, but Dandros wasn't having it. It was Durin's and it belonged to him. The cave had been emptied out, and the goblins left behind creature comforts, but not a single tool in sight. The only weapons that remained was Durin's axe, and a few unfinished weapons in the smithing chamber. The goblins would not be back to this nest. The great chamber was investigated, and the only thing found within was an underground road that hadn't been used in ages. Not since the days of old when Edius was served by a king. Those days were long gone, and the road was in disrepair. The temple was an effigy of old as well, from what they could tell, honoring a god of death that had no record for it. The name was translated from Old Calidrian to one Feldorn Kirix, a name that bore those with long memories to shudder. A presence of amethyst and bloodstone was evident. There was a special jar found as well. This jar was made of rings of amethyst, bloodstone, and jet. Held within was a withered away organ that looked like it once was a kidney. How many more of these jars were there? Regos believed he knew what the jar was, but wouldn't say without confirming it first. In parting, the people of Malatin were guided back home. Dandros decided to return with them, though he did have a date with a woman from Chunda for next full moon. As for Meg, Jaina, and Regos, on to Chunda they decided to go, to ensure the Chundans made it back home as well. And this is where we shall part ways for the time being as well. What does the road to Chunda have to offer for our travelers? Will they make it to Chunda unabated? Where does the road beneath the mountain lead? In time, we will find answers to these questions and so much more. Thank you, travelers. Until next time. Today in the Lore Corner, we will discuss the Dancing Topia. Since this episode was a bit longer and heavier, I wanted to leave you something light today. So we'll discuss an open-air restaurant in the city of Kaldish, from the Kingdom of Slykin. Kaldish itself is hot and humid climate on the eastern side of Slykin, far from the south and east from where our story takes place. With the climate being what it is not uncommon for many of the restaurants to be open air, meaning they have coverings, but the dining would occur essentially out of doors. The kitchen for the Dancing Topia is enclosed. The window is used to pass food out to the waiting customers. A topia is a spicy pepper that is native to the area here around Kaldish. The way it grows, its shape and color would all remind you of a spicier poblano pepper. The pepper also has a bit more meat, around that of a bell pepper. The central hub of the restaurant is the kitchen, of course. A circular bar goes around the place, with places dedicated for ordering and another section for picking up your food. From there, the bright red and green roof is made of terracotta tiles painted to look like peppers with faces. The Dancing Topia is known for and devoted to stuffed peppers that it serves. They have 3 peppers that they stuff here. You can get them in 2 different ways, with meat and meatless. The 3 peppers are, of course, the Topia pepper, of which the establishment is named. Twist peppers, which grow around to about 18 inches in length and of bright colors, and the Hapori pepper. Hapori peppers are smallest bell peppers, also of bright colors. Hapori are the mild option.
Topia, the medium to hot, and the twist peppers for those that are of the daring type. All the peppers are flame roasted and stuffed to order. This month's recipe will be bringing the stuffed Topia pepper to your kitchen, but that will be for patrons. We will be using poblano peppers as a substitution for Topia peppers. If anyone has any other pepper suggestions as alternatives, I would love to try them. With that said, I want to thank you for listening. If you wish to support the podcast, give it a rating where you find it would be a lot. Share it with your friends. A thumbs up in the YouTube space. If you want to support a bit more and get recipes of Caligula in your kitchen as well as additional lore content, please support me over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/goldenimpn. Signing up will give you access to our Discord server. I hope to build a great community over there, but I can only do that with you. So won't you join us and join the conversation? If you want to follow me outside the podcast space, you can find me on Blue Sky at Empress Skald. I am Joe Craig, the Empress Skald. Thank you for listening, and remember, you've been scalded.